On the results centre floor, let's find out who she's catching up with, just to get a sense again of what our senior political figures are busy thinking at this point. Patricia?
Good evening, Peter, and to our viewers. Certainly, as the talks around possible coalitions that are certainly changing the political and administrative landscape in particular the economic hub of the country, Gauteng, and of course here in the capital, Pretoria. Another, of course, reality is also playing out, and that is the emergence of the independent candidates, and we have seen the figures. A sharp increase in this elections from the previous elections. We saw that there were, I think, more than 800 candidates, and this elections, I think they were standing at about 1,500, and I think 46 of them who participated. And already we saw the numbers coming out, the results showing that I think about 44 of them in other parts of the country have, of course, emerged victorious. Here in Tshwane, we also saw a significant number of independent candidates in the various wards who stood for the elections. And I'm joined now by one such, and that is Mr. Jomo Rapolo. He stood as an independent candidate in Ward 21 in Mabopane. Thank you so much for joining us. Just tell us about the main reasons why it was important for you to stand independently.
Okay, good evening. When a community calls, as a responsible person, you respond. And having worked with the community since 2008, recently, with all the challenges that we're experiencing in political parties and how the administration of the country is, there are some community members who felt I could do a better job. They nominated me and I accepted. Hence, you found me on that ballot as a councillor candidate for the 1st November 2021 local elections.
On Monday, we were with you in the particular ward there. There were a lot of challenges, a lot of some of the voters who could not vote, their names not appearing on the ballot. Tell us about that. How did that make you feel? What does that tell you about the elections itself?
A simple thing. The IEC was not ready to host a fair election in Ward 21. I engaged the IEC on behalf of the community from August, explaining to them that they have wrongly designated Ward 21 residents in Ward 12. The IEC chose not to listen, and September was with them. October we engaged on the same aspect, until as a community we shut down the IEC offices in Centurion. CEO Simon Mabolo came, listened. After he listened, he realized the error that they committed. He then instructed some of his officials to assist us. I got daily communications from Mr. Shiburi. They say he's the Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, and some staff members at NAFCOC, Soshanguve, Mabopane offices. Now, in that we were trying to resolve was, there's more than 800 people that I know of who are residents of Ward 21, but were only designated to vote in Ward 12. Upon them realizing that there was no demarcation issue there, because the demarcation was sorted maybe before the local elections in 2011, so they wouldn't say there were demarcation changes. They then decided to say, let's try and solve this matter. I assisted. We shared information between myself and them until they created what they call a 709 list. I termed it a 709 list because after verification, the IEC wrote to me a letter on the 29th of October stating that they can only verify that 709 addresses are located in Ward 21. And those 709 voters were permitted to vote in Ward 12. But what the IEC didn't do, They didn't do due diligence in that neither did they manage to scrap them off in Ward 12. So those voters had an opportunity to either vote in Ward 12 or Ward 21. It was their discretion, and that created a platform for an unfair election.
You also spoke about some people who may have voted twice.
Yes, rumor on the ground, and with our ears on the ground, there were people who were buzzed from Ward 21 to Ward 12, and we were told that there are people who have voted more than once, and the person would have casted his vote in Ward 12 and again in Ward 21. What happened was the IEC officials applying the ink, they applied the ink on top of the skin instead of on top of the nail. And they say once that ink is applied on top of the skin, it is easily removable.
But surely when your ID gets scanned, that might be picked up on the system. I mean, there are other ways to prevent that from happening.
They could have been if the IEC had integrity and took their job seriously. The reason why I'm saying that, at Nomanini Preschool, it's a VD where I'm staying at 21, and at Situ Mokiba Secondary School, it's another VD. For the first 2 hours on Monday, people voted without any scanner. People voted without a voter's roll. They only wrote their names down on a piece of paper. Then they said later on they'll put the information in the system. So that 2 hours gives people room to do whatever can be done. So in essence, the IEC was simply saying to the people of Ward 21, we were not ready to host a fair election. They even ran out of material at Matsepa Primary School and at Bafiti Special School. Swamps were not there. They could not apply ink on some of the voters. They had to stop voters. Most of them returned home of the frustration of waiting for swamps. This is an indication that maybe in other areas it went well, but where I am from, the IEC was never prepared to host us and host an election there.
As a newcomer into the political space, how did that make you feel? Do you perhaps feel that you were compromised, that your chances of emerging strongly were perhaps minimized?
Yes, I would say they were minimized because the 709 voters who 80% of them could not cast their votes, they are my immediate neighbors. These are the people I work with on a daily basis. These are the people who know my capabilities. These are the very same people who asked me to stand for this. Now, if the very same people who nominated you cannot exercise their constitutional right, then automatically your chances are diminished.
That means your confidence at this stage. Do you still feel confident that you might, emerge successful? You were very confident leading up to the elections.
I was very confident that the people I represent will vote for me, and I still maintain that they did vote for me. Obviously, the results we still awaiting the IEC to pronounce. Even though we might have a glimpse of what might be, I cannot share that information because I signed a code of conduct that says I cannot divulge that information until they do. Despite them not respecting us, we still respect this institution, but we feel this institution needs people to be replaced. The top management is not doing their job. They could not even train their staff to prepare for this. Any reasonable person, and the IEC as an unnatural person, should have had a due diligence in this way. My proposal would have been to them, make sure that every voter that you move from Ward 12 to Ward 21, before you give the voters roll to Ward 12 presiding officers, scratch off the names of those people, write W21 next to the name of the person, scratch off, so that explain to the ordinary person that when this person comes in, refer him to Ward 21. The other thing, they said they're going to avail the new voters list in all voting stations in Ward 21, but only 3 had that thing. That is an indication that they misled us into thinking that they have solved the problem, yet they worsen the problem.
Right. Thank you so much there, Mr. Jomo Rapula. He was an independent candidate for Ward 21 here in Tshwane. And you can hear him really, reflecting his dissatisfaction with how voting went in his particular ward. But, of course, these are also reports that we've heard from other parts of the country and other parts of the capital city. Many people who are unhappy with how the voting went, and of course the integrity and credibility of the elections being questioned. But I think the highlight of this interview being the fact that independent candidates are making inroads, and very strongly so, an indication that many communities are now giving their confidence to such people as Mr. Rapulu here. Of course, we're done here. I'm handing over to my colleague Chriselda Lewis.
Well, thank you very much to you, Patricia, and a very good evening to you live from the Gauteng Results Centre here at the Alberton Civic Centre. Of course, Gauteng currently is at 99.5% of the results that have been captured. Ekurhuleni, in terms of the overall results captured so far, that's at 98%. Similarly, Joburg is at 98% and Tshwane at 85%. So the overall progress of results collation in Gauteng is at 96.1%, but it's been a significant drop in support for the ANC in some of the strongholds, including in Soweto. You would know, of course, that Johannesburg, Tshwane, as well as Ekurhuleni have been closely watched. We have been seeing new on the block in the form of Action SA. I want to bring in now political analyst Solly Masilela, who's joining me now live. Mr. Masilela, a very good evening to you. Thanks indeed for your time on the program. So the program of action for Action SA has been to reduce ANC support and ultimately take it out of power. Is this being translated in the results that we're seeing?
Thank you very much and good evening, Chriselda. Yes, indeed. The Action SA has come in as a new block in the whole political scenario, particularly within the Gauteng, Joburg. And indeed, the results currently are indicating that they are having a huge impact in terms of embarking on their project of reducing the voters for the ANC. It has confirmed itself through Mr. Mashaba himself when he said that this is probably the first step towards the attainment of their ultimate objective, that of reducing the power of, or the political power of the ANC towards totally taking it out of power.
Mr. Masilela, what would the implications of that then be?
Chriselda, implications are very huge politically. You must remember that Johannesburg is importantly the economic hub of the country, and Action SA, by penetrating the power base of both the ANC and the DA, to say that, Chriselda, is having a huge impact, given that ultimately you might also go back to the issue of coalition, and we know challenges and practicalities around the operationalization of the coalition being difficult to manage moving forward. Also, to indicate that maybe probably because of the challenges and problems which are faced by the voters of the ANC themselves, staying away from voting, indicate that it has brought in instability within the ANC itself, and it has started now to move on this project of removing the ANC in power.
But could we see, unstable coalitions here, obviously given the ideological differences of these political parties?
Chriselda, coalitions are a new phenomenon in the broader political spectrum of the country. It is at a learning curve, even though there are some guarantee verbatim so from political leaders, Mashaba himself, to an extent that they will develop some guidelines in terms of strengthening its operation, also ensuring that they don't lose their policy position whilst going into the coalition. However, the management successfully so of coalition is going to depend on negotiations. How are they packaging it? The compact arrangement around the coalitions are the ones which are going to indicate whether is it going to succeed or not. It is not an easy thing to manage, but we've seen it in Ekurhuleni succeeding, we've seen it collapsing in Tshwane, we've seen it collapsing in Gauteng. It needs a new start. Even the ANC itself, Chriselda, has confirmed that we are entering a new political era in terms of governance in the country. Probably because of the widening of the political space in terms of even having independent who are also coming in and non-governmental organizations who are joining the political sphere in efforts to try and strengthen our democracy.